By the time this video comes out, the Munich Major will be long over, but I thought it'd be fun to take a look back and do a little retrospective. I do want to keep this short, or at least shorter, so I won't go too deep into anything, just a little recap and my thoughts on how things went. Let's start off with the Swiss stage and the 8 teams eliminated. I got 6 out of 8 playoff teams correct, which I'm pretty happy with. Unfortunately, only 3 out of 8 placements. This got screwed up pretty early for me, but I'll touch on that more later. CAG, Enterprise, D+, Shopify, and Weibo all finished around or exactly where I thought they would. For CAG, yes, the 0-3 finish is disappointing, but it's not entirely surprising either, so I'm not too concerned for them. They were playing with a coach, and they got absolutely brutal matchups in FaZe, G2, and Furia for their elimination match. While I did think they'd be able to win at least one match, the context of their losses makes the whole thing not so bad. Enterprise showed tangible growth this tournament. They won their first match at an international event. Granted, it was against a regional opponent, but a win is a win and my goal for them this tournament. They pushed both W7M and Wildcard to all 12 rounds of regulation, and they finished it off by taking a map off Furia, something they weren't able to do at EWC. I said this in my predictions video, keep an eye on this squad. They need a little time, but if they're given that time, they could become a force on the international stage. D+, they finished where I thought they would. Their 8-7 win against Furia was the obvious highlight, but everything else was a little lackluster. They won't be at regional finals, so their only chance to make SI is the LCQ. I'd say their chances aren't great, but we'll have to get through regional finals first. I think most people expected Shopify to make a deeper run. The analysts and players from other teams definitely did. My predictions had them missing out on playoffs, but I thought it'd be as one of the 2-3 teams, so I guess they didn't quite meet my expectations either. Well, things aren't looking great. They've still got plenty of chances to make SI. Winning regional finals means automatic qualification, though I'd say that's unlikely right now. They could finish second, however, and possibly make it in on points, and if that fails, then they're definitely one of the favorites for the NALCQ. I mean, it wouldn't be an SI without Canadian now, would it? And lastly, Weibo. They finished exactly where I thought they would, but this is one where I wanted to be proven wrong. That being said, they are the best team from APAC. We should see them at SI one way or another. They're currently 5th in points overall. Even if they fall short at regional finals, which I'd say they're the favorites right now, I think they've done most of the work already and should at least make it in on points. The remaining 3 teams are where things got a little more interesting. I said this in my predictions video, but man, it's tough being an SSG fan. They were most certainly the biggest disappointment this event, not only going out 0-3, but a pretty confident 0-3. A 7-1 loss to BDS, one of the weaker teams to start it off. Then they faced their kryptonite of Wildcard and lost as expected, and then they ended it off with a 2-1 loss to NIP. Things started off well, a pretty confident 7-3 and then a narrow 7-5 loss in map 2. Going into map 3, I felt pretty good. The momentum was in favor of NIP in the moment, but SSG kept it close enough that I thought they'd be fine. And then everything went to shit. Not only did they lose map 3 7-0 going out of the tournament with an absolute whimper, but they only managed 6 kills in those 7 rounds. Half of those came in a single round. This might have been the most dominant 7-0 match in history. Now, and this might just be the copium talking here, I'm not concerned yet. Unfortunately, this is just what SSG does these days. I talked about it during my predictions. They could very well come back in the next tournament and make top 4, but they gotta get there first. They're not locked in for SI, so they gotta show up for regional finals. Their fate is in their hands. I just really need them to not screw it up. And please, don't let it require a run through LCQs. The other team to disappoint this tournament was W7M. They started off strong enough, going up 2-0, but then spiraled out of control at the end. They didn't win a single map in any best of 3, losing to Falcons, Wildcard, and Furia. They had 3 opportunities to qualify for playoffs, and they couldn't even win a map. They were looking good going into the tournament, and then just fizzled out at the worst possible time. Well, maybe not as bad as SSG, but pretty close. And they, along with SSG, cost me some valuable prediction points. And last but not least is the only one of these teams that surprised in a good way. BDS surpassed any and pretty much all expectations for them this tournament. They came one round away from making it to playoffs. And while yes, losing in that way definitely hurts, I can only imagine how the players felt, this tournament was an absolute win. They can leave with their heads held high that they proved most people, myself included, wrong. While their chances for SI are not great, it's not lost either. With this performance in Munich, they've given themselves the best possible chance they can. If G2 can make a major with just a 2% chance, nothing is out of the realm of possibility. Moving on to playoffs, my predictions went a lot better. 8 out of 12 correct for a total of 17 out of 28 points. Got me up to the legendary packs, which resulted in a few good pulls, including this uniform, which allowed me to complete the Cardboard Man. One interesting thing to note is that each of the 8 playoff teams exited in the order they qualified. NIP and Furia were the bottom 2 to qualify and went out first, while the grand final ended up being between the 2-3-0 teams of Falcons and M80. For NIP, this result isn't totally surprising. I had them as a bubble team for playoffs and one that I would have potentially swapped out for. They definitely bounced back from the SAL playoffs, but they took the hard way to do it. They went down 0-2 at the start of Swiss and had to fight through 3 elimination matches to qualify, taking out SSG, Shopify, and BDS along the way. Unless something goes horribly wrong, we should see them at SI, and if they can learn from this experience and clean a few things up, I think they could make some headway. Maybe not a contender for the win, but definitely capable of making a deep run. Furia, like NIP, had to go through the elimination gauntlet, and boy did that screw up my predictions. I had them as a guaranteed 3-0 team. Through the SAL stage, they dominated like the Fury of old, but once they got to Munich, things got a lot bumpier. They did qualify for playoffs, which is better than half the teams can say, but their wins weren't overly impressive. Losing to D+ and Shopify, nearly losing a map to KEG, losing a map to Enterprise, and defeating a W7M team they've never lost to. I don't think it's panic stations for them by any means, but they've definitely shown they can bleed, and I think it's hurt their chances of potentially winning at SI. It's almost poetic that G2 and Secret should get eliminated together. In my predictions video, I talked about them together because their stories were so closely tied, and at the end of it all, they still are. In my eyes, they did exactly what they needed to do going into this event. Sure, they didn't take home the win, but they showed that EWC wasn't a fluke and that they can remain at the top. They're both well in control of their destinies, and I'd be surprised if we don't see both of them at SI. In the end, not having much to talk about is a big W for both teams. Without a doubt, the biggest surprise of this whole event was Wildcard. A team I said was fighting to not be bottom 4, instead blew everyone away and finished 4th. They took down some pretty big names along the way as well. 2-0 wins against both W7M and NIP, a 2-1 win against G2, and while it didn't result in a win, they also took a map off the defending world champs FaZe, which in my mind is a pretty big win as well. When the playoff predictions started, losing to FaZe was almost a guarantee, and I felt pretty confident that they would lose to NIP. But the fact that they were able to take a map off FaZe and do it pretty confidently got me to switch my prediction. So what does this mean for the team moving forward? Well, for SI, they definitely got the biggest boost to their chances to qualify. Things are looking pretty good for them right now, but it's not impossible for them to fumble it either. Regional finals are next. What Munich and Reload have shown us is that these guys are a LAN team. When they make it to an event, they flourish, but the problem is getting there. They still struggle within the NAL, and for the rest of the season, that's what stands between them and SI. For the first time since the Manchester Major a year and a half ago, we had a grand final without a Brazilian team. Funny enough, it ended up being the exact same rosters from Manchester, but we'll get to that later. For FaZe, it was a little bit of deja vu, being eliminated by the same squad that beat them and went on to win in Manchester. But at the end of the day, 3rd place is a good result. It's what we expect from this team. I think it is worth noting that despite the podium finish, this wasn't the cleanest tournament from them. Things were a little scrappier, but they got the job done. They're already qualified for SI, so they'll be there to defend their title, and I can guarantee they won't go down without a fight. If FaZe got a little bit of deja vu, then holy crap did Falcons get an ocean of it. Not only did they lose their 4th grand final in a row, but they lost it to the same roster that they lost to back in Manchester. At this point, I don't know what to say about these guys. They were so dominant throughout the whole tournament, and then just fell apart at the end. While the series was actually quite close in spite of the 3-1 scoreline, to me it just never felt like Falcons had a solid grasp on the match at any point. Something in the air just didn't feel right compared to watching them earlier in the tournament. Up until the third place match, it genuinely felt like Falcons had what it took to take home the win. I even chose them as my winner in the predictions. But after M80 beat FaZe, a little doubt crept in, but I don't think it was Falcons' fault. M80 just felt that good. As I said, the series was actually quite close, and I don't think they necessarily did anything wrong. It just never felt like they had a solid grasp on things, because M80 was just that much better. One last note for Falcons at this event, one thing I found interesting was looking at the faces of the Falcons players when they lost. There wasn't the same kind of emotion we've seen from them at the previous events. They just looked stunned. No real tears, just a stunned, almost relaxed silence. And I don't blame them. I can only imagine what was going through their heads, the fact that it happened again. I almost wonder if that's what got to them at the end, the thought that it could and was happening again, and to the same team no less. Looking ahead, obviously they're locked in for SI, and I think the question is not whether or not they'll do well, but whether or not they can actually win it. If they're not going to win, then it's probably better for them to go out early rather than going through a 5th Grand Finals defeat. Then the next story would be whether or not they make a roster change. It sounds absurd suggesting to break up such an amazing roster, but at the end of the day, they're here to win, and being stuck at second best just isn't good enough. But all of this suffering for the Falcons players wouldn't be possible without the core of M80. What's there to say? They did it again. They came in as a dark horse and took home the win. They've shown that Manchester wasn't just a fluke. Gunnar even said it himself. There are a lot of people who would never have said that he would be a 2-time major champion, but they've proved them all wrong. Gunnar, Hot and Cold, Gavini, and Diffuser take home their 2nd title in 2 years. Kino not only reaches his first Grand Finals, but he takes it home as well, and Fabian makes history as the winningest individual in Siege history. Not to take it away from any of the players, but his presence behind them had a huge part in their win. Not only was he providing support in the strategy department, but he was their biggest hype man as well. The casters called it out repeatedly. For someone who has done it all, the fire seems to be burning brighter than ever for him. And he's grown as a person as well. Gone are the days of constantly dumpstering on everybody. Sure, he still talks smack, but he's also respectful of the other teams, telling the audience to applaud them as well for their effort, and saying things like it takes 2 great teams to make a great match. The vibes are high on this squad, both as a team and on an individual level. For them, regional finals are more of a formality. They'll have their eyes firmly on that hammer. My only concern now is they're in this pattern of ups and downs. After having a good event, they seem to flop at the next. For their sake, I hope they can keep riding this high as the Munich Major champions.